Good afternoon and welcome back to the public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission for today, March 28th, 2023. This meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel, so you can engage with the meeting in either platform. And we will be resuming this afternoon session with public hearing item number 6, and I will turn it to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to take us through the afternoon agenda.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll start with public hearing item number 6, LPC 23-05435, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 1088, lot 72, 439 8th Street in the Park Slope Historic District Extension. This is a neo-Greek style row house designed by Jefferson F. Wood and built circa 1884, and the application is to construct a rear yard addition.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and the staff will be taking you through the presentation. Michelle, you may begin.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners. Michelle Craren, preservation staff. This application is for work at 439 8th Street, the front and rear facades of which you can see in this slide. The house is located on the north side of 8th Street between 7th and 8th Avenues. Here you can see the existing floor plans and the proposed, showing an extension of the basement level into the rear yard, which is the proposal before you today. On the left is the existing elevation, and on the right is the proposed, a one-story addition clad in brick with punched openings and with a roof deck replacing the existing wooden deck is the proposed scope of work. Here you can see the proposed section, as well as that rear elevation again. This slide shows some examples of other additions at the block, including small partial width, one-story additions, which may be historic to some of the buildings at the block, an existing full width addition at number 437, and historic Ls that exist at some buildings further east on the block. However, the block does not contain a majority of buildings with additions of this depth or greater, which is why the proposal is before the commission today. And here are just some window details. And then lastly, here's a rendering of the proposal. The existing rear facade is a coated brickwork, but the addition will remain an uncoated red brick. The architect is here and can answer any of your questions.
Great, thank you very much, Michelle. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions at this time, so let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received one sign up in advance for this item, that being Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. While the massing of this proposed rear addition is appropriate, the addition's facade is inappropriate because the hierarchy of the windows is not related to the rest of the building. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. And I'm looking through our attendees list right now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 6 recommends approval. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to turn to the applicant and ask if you'd like to respond to the testimony or add anything else at this time. So, Mr.
Nothing
Goldman.
okay. Nothing at this time.
Okay. All right, then, commissioners, if there are no final questions, we'll go ahead and move toward closing this hearing and beginning our discussion. So if you can all unmute yourselves. All right, and Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So motion.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. This is a proposal for a one-story rear yard addition on a rear facade that is not visible from a public way and in a row with a block with some other extensions, but not enough for this to be eligible to be approved at staff level, but it technically otherwise meets the rules. And so we are looking at it primarily today to evaluate it in the context of the other rear yard additions within the block. So we'll begin our discussion with that. And I don't know, Michelle, maybe you do want to just go back to the block plan quickly or the photos. Okay. So we'll begin our discussion now. Commissioner, Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Sure. This is a very modest addition, and I think that there are some other additions, obviously. So I think it's totally appropriate. I can approve it as presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson,
I can approve this one.
Commissioner Lutfi. Oh, we can't hear you. Is your, go to the little sound, the volume icon on the bottom of your screen and maybe just see if your volume got turned down. Okay, I'll let you try to figure that out and we'll keep moving. Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree. It's appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Chu
Appropriate.
and Commissioner Master.
Appropriate.
Okay, great. I think it's, as I said, it's one story. It doesn't overwhelm the building, the adjacent buildings, or the central green space. And it will match the addition at the adjacent building and doesn't project deeper than any of the others. So I think this is completely consistent with our approvals. Commissioner Chapin, would you go ahead and read the motion?
Sure, thank you. In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Brooklyn, LPC 23-05435, 439 8th Street, Park Slope Historic District Extension, Neo Greco style row house designed by Jefferson F. Wood and built circa 1884. Application is to construct a rear yard addition. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Park Slope Historic District Extension. I recommend approval, finding that the work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features of the building, that the proposed rear yard addition will not be visible from any public thoroughfares, that other rear yard additions with a similar height and depth exist within the block, and that the proposed one-story rear yard addition will be modest in scale and will not overwhelm the building, adjacent buildings, or the block central green space, that the plain brick cladding and punched window and door openings will harmonize with the rear facade of the building, and that the work will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the Park Slope Historic District Extension.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Right, the next item is public hearing item number 7, LPC 22-11703. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 485, Lot 7502, 60 Greene Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is a Renaissance Revival style warehouse building designed by Henry Fernbach and built in 1871. And the application is to modify and install storefront infill.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Bangwei, if you could unmute yourself, I will give you control of the presentation. I will ask you to unmute. Maybe that'll be easier. Great. Okay. And so now if you could just click on your screen. Perfect. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record and you may begin. Bangwei, we cannot hear you. We still can't hear you.
How about now?
Perfect. Thank you. Please state
Thank
your
you.
name for the record.
Good afternoon. This is Bangwei Bao from Newman and Rudy Architects. We are presenting 60 Greene Street storefront infill proposal on behalf of our client, Watches of Switzerland Group. The project is on Greene Street between Broome Street and Spring Street. We are proposing to replace the storefront window on bay number 1 and the bay number 3 to larger windows. We are also proposing to replace the fixed door on bay number 2 to a new cast iron bulkhead and a large window that match to bay 1 and bay number 3. Lastly, we are proposing to restore the existing door at bay number 4. All existing storefront window and bulkhead is in good condition with minor water damage and natural aging. Our proposal draw reference from 70 and 76 Greene Street, which had also gone through similar storefront treatment in 2006. The lower left image is the picture for 70 and 76 Greene Street storefront. As you can see in the neighboring storefronts, most storefront has large windows. Our proposal will not disrupt the neighborhood general aesthetic. In summary, the proposal tries to satisfy the interest of the retail stores while blend into the existing Greene Street storefront aesthetics and respect the historical storefront material. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions? All right, not seeing any questions at this time. We'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And as always, we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to everyone else. So I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of signups beforehand, so we'll be hearing from them first. The first signup being Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please state your name for the record and unmute your line, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine, speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this infill appropriate, but given the beauty of the original doors, we recommend that the applicant retain the doors after they're removed and store them for possible future restoration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Okay, and next up, we'll be hearing from John Graham from VSNY. So John Graham, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. The careful detailing of the existing storefront leads us to think that the wide center mullion in the show windows, mimicking the vertical styles of the double doors, is there for a reason. The tax photo, which we provided with our testimony, is adjacent to the one provided in the presentation and taken from the other direction, and appears to show that the existing configuration does in fact match the historic configuration. We can't tell whether all the openings contain double doors, but whether they were doors or windows, they appear to be divided as they are today. We therefore find that because the existing design appears to be closely based on the historic storefronts, the proposed change to undivided display windows is not appropriate. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm looking through the attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends the following: denial of replacing the historic divided ground floor windows in 3 bays with single panes of plate glass, which will destroy the repeated rhythm of the ground floor. Denial of the replacement of wooden infill based on the report that wood is in good condition, except for a small portion of one door which may be repaired. Approval of the replacement of the wooden window bulkhead with cast iron to match the existing original in the other bays. And denial of the replacement of the entrance unless it is verified by staff that the existing door is unsatisfactory, and if it is found to be in need of replacement, that the door with a faithful reproduction of the existing door and of the painting of the new doors and railings to match the existing. Further, we also received a letter, written testimonial from one other individual, and they recommend denial. So I will give that back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much, Gregory. Okay, I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you'd like to respond to the testimony.
No, thank you.
Okay, can I just, because it was raised in the testimony, the removal of historic fabric, can you just clearly maybe go to the ground floor elevation and just describe which portions are historic fabric and which ones are newer infill that was approved to match the historic?
Okay, let me see if I can go back. So both the bottom bulkhead and then the upper wooden window frame, they are historical materials for bay number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. So all of them, the upper and then the bottom bulkhead, they are historical materials.
Okay, I thought some of them were commission approved, but you're saying every bay has historic infill.
Oh wait, I mean, all these materials, they are historical. Yes.
Corey, do you want to just?
Yeah, I think everybody should keep in mind that the tax photo was referenced in testimony and that we've looked at as well is taken 70 years after the building was constructed, and we know that this infill at these types of buildings were replaced frequently and didn't necessarily ever match. I think in some cases you have the original bulkheads, like the cast iron bulkheads that even were on hinges and opened. Originally, they may have even had a roll down shutter that came to them and no sort of window behind it. And so I think you're seeing a couple of generations of infill here. So original bulkheads in some cases, and maybe original doors, but also other replacement wood windows that kind of worked with the language that was present at the time. So I'm not sure the architect or staff knows all of the different pieces, but we do believe there's at least 2 generations of infill here, if not more, including some that's probably more recent. You can tell that I think it's bay 1 and bay 3 have, 2 lights, but a very wide mullion in the middle.
Right.
They kind of look like the pair of doors, but they're not. It's a fixed window, and that's kind of an unusual, window configuration for something that might be original.
Right. And that's why I was thinking that portion of it was maybe commission approved to look like the original, but not the historic. All right, Commissioner.
Can I interject? I think that our understanding of bays 1 and 3 are that those are the historic doors, but the sort of seam running down the middle of the two leaves has been sealed and painted over.
Okay. Thank you, Marie. All right, Commissioner Chapin? Commissioner Chapin, did you have a question?
Yes, in some staff notes, it mentions, I think that this was the subject of a restrictive declaration. Is that correct? And do you want to just say a bit about, that?
Sure. Yeah. In 98, this building came forward requesting, well, they were going to the City Planning Commission requesting a change of use. And as part of that process, they came to the LPC and we approved some work and including restoration work to bring the building up to a first-class sound condition, and found that there was a preservation purpose and supported that application. John, did you want to add anything?
No, that's all. It was, I believe, for bulk and use at this building.
For both, okay.
Yeah.
So that is, that special permit was obtained, and the renovation and the use of this building reflects that approval.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
Excuse me, I have two questions. One has to do with the guardrail or handrail. Do they remain or do they get removed? And the second one is there is a detail on one of the drawings that show a metal kind of bulkhead on the doors. And I didn't quite understand what that was for. It's a detail sheet that details. It's a blown up detail. It's a wall section of the door. Keep going, keep going. It's a wall section. Yeah, this detail. What is this metal piece that's being attached?
Answering to your question, this is our understanding of the existing cast iron bulkhead. That this bulkhead is protruding out of this window frame about 2 5/8 inch. So we are documenting this condition in bay number 1 and bay number 3.
And it's made out of metal, actually not wood, huh?
In bay number 1 and number 3, it is made out of metal, and we saw the metal material under the paint layers. But for bay number 2, the bulkhead is made out of wood. Yeah.
And the handrail or guardrail, is that remaining even when you put the windows up? Or?
All of the existing handrail will be remained.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
I would add that the cast iron bulkhead is a condition that is typical of the historic storefronts in Soho. Often an integral roll down gate would come down that had concealed tracks, and it would sit on that cast iron base.
Okay.
All right, other questions? Okay, so I think I will ask you all to unmute so that we can move to our discussion. All right, Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So move.
Thank you. And Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So as Commissioner Chapin pointed out, this is a building that was the subject of a modification of use, and as a result, entered into a cyclical maintenance plan outlined in a restrictive declaration that outlined the restoration work to be done at the time and for it to be maintained in a first-class sound condition. And At that time, we did support the application for the modification of use in bulk because there was a preservation purpose to the project. So the proposal today asks or seeks to make changes to the existing storefronts. We know there is historic fabric here. There are maybe different generations, but they do retain some of the proportions and details that we do see in historic storefronts. And the applicant was primarily looking at opening up the display windows to make larger display windows, which is also something typical in the district. But I suspect that it sounds like the doors, or at least a configuration of doors, does represent historic fabric and was probably considered at the time that we reviewed the application for the special permit. So we'll begin our discussion on this one. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one?
Not really,
No.
actually. Because I think I am of two minds on this now. Now that it seems like there's a real historic fabric here and that it's been painted over to, and really whatever, smoothed out so that we can't see the seams. I'm not 100% sure that we should do this. And I think I'd like to hear what the other commissioners have to say.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum? Oh, I think he's had to step away. Commissioner Jefferson?
My position is that if we can maintain the historic fabric and modify it to get the image on the right, we should do that. But my position is just to keep the historic fabric as much as possible.
All right. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, although we permit, obviously, these large display windows very, very often, I feel that in this case, when you have a restrictive declaration, it's just as we look at an individual landmark differently, that we should preserve as much of the historic fabric as is feasible. So I think they should work with the staff to try to preserve the historic fabric, and they can enlarge the window perhaps, but keeping as much of the historic fabric as possible.
Okay, I mean, it does seem that it came out in the presentation that all of the doors are historic, even those that have been sort of fixed to be windows, right? So some have, I think, had their sort of been sealed over to make them fixed, but I think they were all doors that are of some generation, but with age, yeah.
Well, so I am in favor of not. So is there some modification that could occur and still retain most of the historic?
Yeah, well, we could, and maybe if we move to the elevation for the proposed, and one approach could be to keep more to allow some of the windows to open up, but to keep more doors. That might be a compromise that would keep more historic fabric, but allow some to open up. So maybe the two bays that are sealed already could become windows, since that's functionally what they are. All right, well, we'll keep going around and we'll keep thinking. Okay.
But
All right.
I would like to see more historic fabric retained.
Yeah. Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay, sorry for spacing out there a minute ago. I think that because this is was done under a special permit that highlights the importance of preserving original materials and original design, what I'd be opposed to the changes, but what I would suggest, just putting on my architect's hat for a minute, and maybe this is, Fred wouldn't like it if I said it, but he's not here, so I'll say it anyway. Maybe what they should do is put a clear full height sheet of glass behind the doors and then open the doors when they're open and close the doors when they're closed. I think that you could preserve the historic material and have your nice show window. But I think here, because the historic material is verified, I think we should try to keep those doors.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to now turn to Commissioner Chu and then Commissioner Master. And this is, I think, the first time that you're going to be seeing an application that was for a building that was the subject of a special permit. So this is not, the application itself isn't for a special permit, but this property did receive a special permit. And under that process, the Landmarks Commission had to find that there was a preservation purpose to the proposal at the time. And that generally means that at the time they propose head to toe restoration or significant restoration work, and that they enter into a restrictive declaration that binds the owners and any future owners to a cyclical maintenance plan to maintain it in that condition. And so they did take advantage of that special permit and converted the building. And so, as Commissioner Chapin said, it does in some way sort of set a different standard for our review of appropriateness. Mark, I don't know if you want to jump in if I'm describing this in any way that is incorrect, but we generally do hold a different standard to buildings that have received a special permit and are expected to maintain the building in a preserved state. So the challenge here is that it does seem that there is some level of historic fabric in every bay, and they are seeking to enlarge the windows above the bulkheads in, I guess, 2 of the bays anyway, to allow for larger display windows, which proportionally are typical also in the historic district, but would involve removing some historic fabric.
But
So
it
Steve-
also involves replacing bay 2 and 4 completely.
Yeah, Corey, do you want to
think
just explain
so.
that so we understand it thoroughly?
Yeah, so Bay 4 is currently typical doors, and they wish to replace those in kind. But obviously they would be new. And the Bay 2 is currently the setup that has a wood bulkhead that looks like the cast iron ones. And then apparently the operable upper portion installed above that. And they'd like to replace that one with a new cast iron bulkhead. And then sort of the single light window that you see on the screen above. So those 2 bays are sort of a full replacement of the material under the transom, whereas bays 1 and 2 seek to just remove the wood portion above the cast iron and put in a single light window in its place.
Right. I'm sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Or is it my turn to talk?
Yes, if
Okay.
if you feel comfortable.
It's tough. I do think that the proposal is a sensitive proposal. However, considering the conditions of the building as just described, I will also say that the building is a beautiful cast iron. It's a gorgeous building, and it seems to be in great condition. I don't see that much deterioration or damage of those existing 4 bays, which does make me feel like if we can maintain that existing fabric and not replace with something to match in kind, I would try to do that. I also think that it is true that many storefronts have been replaced with larger windows and eliminated the division, but this building seems complete. And it seems a shame to lose the verticality that is so great about these cast iron buildings, is the vertical expression. And if that strip, which is really annoying, that's very flat between there, showed more articulation, I think it would bring more attention to those windows. I think that's maybe a retrofit, as you had mentioned, that was slapped on top. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Commissioner Master, do you feel you have enough information to weigh in?
I hear what everybody else is saying about the building, but I do understand that we do have these display windows in the neighborhood and that it's common and this is a retail store. So I understand the need for this. It seems to me that even if we do have the display stores, we can still retain a lot of the historic material. Instead of having them replace the bulkhead on the bottom, we could probably retain a lot of the historic material and not have them replace it. I'm wondering if people feel very strongly, can we perhaps do 2 open display windows?
Okay.
I don't know if that's 1 and 3 and not do 2, and then retain as much of the historic material as possible.
Yeah, and I think I sort of am a little bit of that mind as well. I think that retaining the bulkheads that are all historic and retaining bay number 4, which is a historic door, and we haven't seen any reason to replace it in kind. As Commissioner Chu noted, the condition looks good. So maybe fewer number of, you could have 2 doors and 2 display windows, maybe. And I might be open to that, but I think that we're not comfortable with the proposal as presented today. So I would say to the applicants to think about how they can retain more historic fabric. And if they really feel they need to have larger display windows, to come back with a proposal that involves removing less historic fabric from those bays and limiting the number of bays where that would happen. So we'll take no action and ask them to rethink. Certainly any restoration or providing missing articulation to the doors to sort of recreate the historic condition, which also would be very appropriate, and I think it would really enhance the space, the storefronts. That could be done at staff level, but if you still wish to pursue some enlarging of the openings, you can come back to the commission with that revised proposal. Right, so we'll take no action and we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 8, LPC 23-04854, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 474, lot 7504, 473 Broadway in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is a commercial building designed by Ralph Townsend and built in 1894 to 95. The application is to construct a rooftop addition.
Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and the staff will be taking you through the presentation. Richard, you may begin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Richard Lai, Preservation Staff. I will be presenting the proposal, and the architect, Kenneth Bainton, is here to answer any questions. So the property is one of a pair of commercial buildings along with 475 on the right. On the west side of Broadway between Broome and an existing 1-story penthouse, and install rooftop HVAC equipment that is visible over the side facade. Sorry. So here are the photos of the existing rooftop addition. As I said, that there's a and it comprises a largely stucco-clad penthouse, and at the front portion there's a sloped glazed solarium that you can see in the bottom right photo. There's also detached, if you can see in the bottom middle photograph, the detached elevator and facade.
Richard, you're breaking up a lot. Maybe if you could turn your video off and we'll try that again. And if not, maybe we can hand it over to the architect to finish going through everything.
Okay, is that any better?
So far, it sounds better. So let's see how it goes.
Okay. So here are the two axons before and after. The existing penthouse is largely going to be rebuilt, particularly rebuilding the side facades. The bulkheads are going to be left alone. The solarium basically will be incorporated into the penthouse. And as you can see along the perimeter of the roof, a short fixed awning is proposed, which is a lead-coated copper flashing and cladding, along with glazed window and door openings. Just behind the sloped stair bulkhead, you can see on the right-hand axon, there is a mechanical enclosure, again, to be clad in lead-coated copper. Let's get to the next slide.
Richard, would it help if I took over the presentation?
Yeah, you could try that. I'm getting a significant lag here. Okay, thank you, Abby. So with the two plans, just showing the organization of the rooftop addition, existing and proposed, and just showing the schematic, the various components that we discussed here. And next slide, please. And here are just some details for that sort of short fixed awning around the perimeter of the addition, and also the mechanical enclosure between the sloped stair bulkhead and the side facade of the penthouse. Next slide, please. And just the different existing and proposed side elevations of the addition. Next slide, please. And both the front elevation, as you can see, is largely obscured by the very significant cornice, and the sections just showing rough difference in massing, but really it's just the sort of a extension of the flared sort of short awnings at the corners. Next slide, please. And just the side section, again, just to illustrate that the main roof line will not really be getting any larger from existing to proposed. Just very minor changes. Next slide, please. And it's just the materials palette, just to show the sort of the light gray lead-coated copper flashing and cladding compared to the existing stucco, and the window and door assemblies will be done with a natural stained teak wood materiality. Next slide, please. Now we start with the visibility assessment, and as you can see from the sort of sightline drawings, that over the front facade, we don't anticipate, and in that we confirmed by the mock-ups, any visibility directly over the front facade. Next slide, please. And here's a general axon just showing this in relation to some of its neighbors. Next slide, please. And here we can see some of the visibility photographs, and just to illustrate some of the components that the proposal is going to be incorporating. Next slide, please. And as you can see from sort of the visibility cone, it's really sort of south on Broadway looking north, and that you'll then start to see the components of the mock-up. Next slide, please.
Sure.
And as just going a little further south down Broadway. Next slide, please. And just for some zoomed in versions from the similar shots, both the existing mock-up and then just highlighting the components that are visible. So largely in the foreground on the bottom right and the top right, the mechanical enclosure, and then the edges of the roof, the short awnings. Next slide, please. And then even further south, looking up, and again, just the components of the front, along the front facade, the edges of that short awning. Next slide, please. And just to confirm from Mercer Street through the break in the building wall that there's no visibility evident of the mock-up. And that's it. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, Kenneth Bainton is here to answer.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions at this time, so let's see if we have public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through any testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We did not receive any testimony for this item, and I am looking through our attendees list right now, and I do not see any hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval, and I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so I don't know if the applicant wants to make any final statement before we close the hearing and begin our discussion, but Mr. Bainton, if you'd like to do that, you're welcome to right now.
Hi, this is Ken Bainton. I don't feel I need to add anything.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to send you all requests to unmute so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. All right, and Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So move.
And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion now. And this is to essentially reconstruct the penthouse and install additional mechanical equipment at the roof. We've seen many views here, and it is very minimally visible from most of these views, and from great distance. Some are from great distances, and you really just see the top line of it. And the new bulkhead and mechanical equipment seems to be consistent with rooftop HVAC that we see in this district. So I think this is in keeping with other similar approvals. Commissioner Master, would you like to comment on it?
Start the comments?
Yes.
Yeah, I think this seems to be pretty straightforward. I think importantly, the massing of the proposed is very similar to the existing. I think that in terms of the public vantage points, I think there's limited visibility, mainly from the south, but again, similar to what was there before. And then the design and the materials seem to be appropriate for other rooftop additions in the area. So I think I would approve this.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, I agree with what Commissioner Masters just said. I can support this.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
I can support this.
Commissioner Lutfi,
I agree.
Commissioner Chu,
Appropriate.
and Commissioner Goldblum.
Great.
Okay, great. So I think we all agree on this one. Commissioner Master, would you be comfortable reading the motion? Do you have it there?
Yes.
Okay, great.
In the matter of LPC 23-04854, 473 Broadway, Soho, in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, a commercial building designed by Ralph Townsend and built in 1894-95. The application is to construct a rooftop addition.
You note?
I note the building's scale, style, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the new rooftop addition will be modest in size and set back from the front and rear facades, and will largely maintain the massing of the existing penthouse. That the rooftop addition will only be visible from public thoroughfares over the south side facade from limited vantage points at a distance, and will be seen within the context of other rooftop accretions. That the design and materiality of the rooftop addition and mechanical enclosure, featuring lead-coated copper cladding and wood window and door assemblies, will be in keeping with the treatment of rooftop additions and other rooftop accretions found throughout this historic district, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special character of the building or the Soho Cast Iron Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 7 in favor and none opposed, the motion passed.
All right, so that's approved, and we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 9, LPC 23-05155, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 489, lot 22, 188 Spring Street in the Sullivan Thompson Historic District. This is an altered federal style row house built circa 1824. The application is to alter the front facade, construct rear yard and rooftop additions, and excavate the cellar.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Matthew, I'm going to give control to you. If you could click on your screen for me, please. Great, you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Luciolo. I'm Project Director for Crown Architecture and Consulting. I have with me Peter Radocha, who is a project designer for our office as well.
Hello, everyone.
This is a street level facade alteration, rear horizontal enlargement of the existing 4-story residence with the replacement of all windows and doors at 188 Spring Street. As a general introduction to the building, it is a 3.5-story altered federal style brick building on Spring Street between Sullivan and Thompson Street. This is existing front facade of 188 Spring and sister 190 Spring. You can see the left 182 through 186 has been demolished and is currently under construction. Oh, I'm sorry. It's flipping. Sorry, that was for this slide. You could see the demolished building on your left for 182 through 186 Spring. Here's some existing conditions from the rear, which will be fully non-visible once 182 Spring Street's new building is completed. This building will be approximately 7 stories and full lot depth to the right of us from the rear.
So the designation report for this building estimates it was built in 1824 and has had a large number of alterations since then. Few major alterations were noted throughout this report.
but there were some additional alterations not listed as well. And you can see to the right in the Sanborn map, I think it's also worth, or we think it's also worth mentioning that the northern part of the block no longer keeps the internal donut intact. And some of these alterations can easily be found throughout the historical photos, including the molded lintels that were believed to be present initially, then replaced with flat masonry lintels. Then again, in the 1960s, those masonry lintels were replaced back to molded lintels. And then another alteration, the horse pass on the left was altered to lead into the interior as a secondary entry. And then the wood paneling and stained glass window at the ground level was installed. An attic dormer on the front and rear pitched roof is also installed during that same period. And finally, the first floor, initially residential, was converted to a commercial laundry and then back to residential. So 188 Spring has seen some major alterations throughout the years. Looking throughout this timeline gives a clear understanding that there is very little historic features left here. And this is something we take into consideration within our proposal. So the building itself is within the Sullivan-Thompson Historic District, and throughout this district there is a wide variety of scales and styles. Many of the surrounding federal style buildings, similar to our own, remain consistent with traditional federal style design.
The streetscape gives a better perspective of Spring Street itself, being mostly commercial at the ground floor with residential above, the intermingling of scales and styles within the block, and a good initial look at the 7-story building being constructed to the east of us at 182 Spring Street. Here's some photos of the non-historic ground floor stained glass window and entry doors, as well as the upper floor's deteriorating molded lintels. The left entry door is no longer being used for the interior. To fully understand the historic remains of the front facade, we probed in numerous locations at the first floor and upper floor window. In image set 1, you can see the remaining historic brownstone lintel at the adjacent 182 Spring Street location. And in image set 2, at the second floor window was removed to show the inner layer of the brick is also the unoriginal brick matching the current brick facade, replaced sometime within the 60s. In image set 3, at the base of the ground floor wood paneling, we found about 3 inches of concrete parging underneath, revealing what's assumed to be a second layer of brick within the concrete parging. We are assuming the brick to be unsalvageable, but they'll be fully determined at the time of construction. Additionally, we found that there was an alt filing completed in 1962 at 190 Spring that may have been for the replacement of both buildings' facades, because there was a demolition permit filed in 1961 and multiple complaints prior for the facade.
So for a proposal, starting by looking at the redesign of the first floor facade, we propose the removal of the unoriginal wood cladding and replacing it with brick to match the above floors, either by using any salvageable brick, restored brick from the front, or replacing it with similar brick removed from the rear facade. Throughout our design process, we explored leaving the existing fenestration, but we discovered more and more alterations of as we discovered more and more alterations of the facade, we decided to follow a design more appropriate to the traditional federal style building. And you can see with the left side historic path becoming obsolete as a secondary entry door for a single family home, we propose its removal and replacement with 2 double hung 6x6 windows and restoration of the brownstone lintel. And then moving to the right of that, we propose a historically appropriate style door in the original entry location with the addition of a transom above to provide more light into the ground level interior. And then additionally, the proposed includes the addition of a cast stone water table and stairs below, which was commonly found within many residential federal style homes. And we believe this draws more attention to the separation of the private first floor to the public thoroughfare. And then here you can see the full elevation of the front facade, including our proposed first floor design, as well as the entire above facade and roof, which we propose the second and third floor windows to be replaced in original condition. And in this being consistent with the appropriate federal style design, we propose new cast stone lintels and sills for those windows as well. And in this overall elevation, it also provides a better picture of the new consistency and rhythm between the upper levels and ground level facade, which is not there currently. And then starting to look at the rear, you can see it's left in a poor condition with no historic features, including the replaced brick that matches the front facade. And the openings look to have been altered or added and removed over time, as well as you can see up above, an unoriginal dormer on the pitched roof similar to the front as well.
Within the rear, we propose a contemporary style to blend with 182 Spring, the 7-story contemporary new building. Although we use a high amount of glazing, we leave wide brick piers on each side and ample amount of robust mullions and panels to break up the glazing. We raise the unoriginal dormer to provide acceptable room height within, leaving the depth of the dormer and original pitch roof on each side. All these features remain non-visible from the street. We're using elements taken from 182 Spring to blend the contemporary style of our own. We are using the same terracotta from their projecting bay windows and black finishes for our trim mullions and frames. The brick will match the color and common bond of the front of our building. Here's looking at the existing and proposed plans, gives a better idea of the increased floor area. So this is the cellar level, which is adding approximately 34 feet, 34 and a half feet. The first floor is 24 and a half feet, still providing a 30-foot rear yard. The second floor, we're only adding 8.5 feet from the existing to the proposed, which is smaller than the existing deck currently installed. And the third floor will match the second floor in depth. And then the fourth floor dormer, we are just raising and widening. We are not extending out any further. This section gives a better understanding of the rear enlargement as well. Again, proposing an additional 24 off the first floor, an additional 8'6" off the second and third, and the fourth floor attic. We're proposing only to raise the ceiling height to a standard height from its current 7 foot and widen the dormer minimally. You can see within the sight line section, the rear enlargement and raising of the rear dormer still remains non-visible, and the scale of the new neighboring building when compared to our proposal. The site plan also gives you a better perspective of the typical scale of the surrounding buildings on the block compared to our proposal, which remains substantially smaller.
So one precedent we looked at for this was for Bedford for both the front and the rear facade design, which we have actually completed in the past. This front facade design utilizes, like our current proposal for 188 Spring, a traditional federal style elements throughout. And then in the rear, it utilizes a more contemporary feel and a higher amount of glazing, again, similar to our current proposal. Another similarity of this building is because of its condition in the front, it was completely redesigned and replaced. And then here is a rendering of the front facade, which gives a idea of how it may look with the proposed materials and alteration. And then in the rear as well, with larger glazing and a contemporary rhythm. Additionally, the proposed brick of 188 Spring will match that of 190 Spring, providing a consistent feature visible from that building, that neighboring building. And you can also see in the elevation that even the rear of 190 Spring to the left uses altered arched windows, which is a strange element when compared to a traditional federal style glazing.
Lastly, we have provided this massing, looking at the rear of our building and how it's compared to the neighboring buildings. We feel this massing explains our intent for our property to help bridge the gap between the sister building of 190 Spring to the new development at 182 Spring, taking elements from both properties. As a volume precedent, we looked at the approved 9 Van Dam Street project, which is also an altered federal style building approved for a considerable rear addition and excavation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. You said that the ground floor doesn't have any historic fabric. Are you saying that the proportions of the ground floor are not original if you go back to the photographs?
Correct. And neither is the brick for the whole front facade. If you look at the historic photos, you can tell that the brick was replaced in, we believe to be around 1962. I think I pass it. 1 second. Here you go.
Go back one more. So this is the historic photo.
Yeah, so if you look,
a door, and it has a centerpiece, and then it has another door, right? And then if you go along, so the proportions are totally different from this one. So this is when is this? 1904, 1960. So this
yeah,
is
1964, correct.
And it's pretty close, no?
So this was a conversation back and forth regularly with this is, what do we take from what is there now? And, because of this design, this is no longer going to be a commercial ground level. So does it make sense to keep what is this commercial style window and opening? Also from just a safety standpoint of having 2 residential doors at the ground level doesn't make sense for a single family residential building. So it's been a conversation internally and actually at the community board of what made the most sense. Did it make more sense to do something that was historically appropriate for a federal style building for this?
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, other questions? All right, I don't see any other questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. And if you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance, as we always do, and then we'll get to everyone else. But whether or not you signed up, please raise your hand so that we can identify you. And I'll turn it to Gregory Kala to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a few signups beforehand, so we'll be hearing from them first. The first signup was Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'll be promoting you to panelist now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. This is a federal-style row house that dates to 1824. Though the building was altered at the turn of the 20th century, the building's historic features are largely intact, including, prominently, a horsewalk, which the applicants propose removing. We believe that the horsewalk is historically significant fabric and should be maintained. HDC also finds the rear facade to be too commercial looking and wholly inappropriate for this building. It must be reduced in height so that the original massing of the building is more legible, and the third floor double casement windows and attic dormer can be retained. Finally, we will note that the applicant proposes excavating the cellar of this building, which we find wholly inappropriate. Doing excavation on an 1824 building as fragile as this one could be catastrophic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And next we'll be hearing from Shannon Smiley from Village Preservation. So Shannon Smiley, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
All right, one moment here. Good afternoon, Commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Shannon Smiley, and I am testifying on behalf of Village Preservation. We are the largest membership organization in Greenwich Village, the East Village, and NoHo, and proposed and advocated for the designation of the Sullivan-Thompson Historic District, within which 188 Spring Street and its surroundings are located. We have some very serious concerns regarding the proposed application and urge the Commission not to approve it as is. This and neighboring 190 Spring Street are federal era houses built in 1824 and are among the oldest and most significant surviving buildings in this district. Regarding the proposed changes to the front facade, we have no objections to the proposed changes and restoration above the ground floor. However, elimination of the horsewalk entrance is an unacceptable degradation of an especially important element of the historic fabric of the building and should be denied. Additionally, the central window should be a double hung window as it was historically. The entrance door should have historic detailing. The steps should be in brownstone, and the lower brownstone detailing should extend to grade. Regarding the rear facade, there is entirely too much glass. While the current rear facade is far from pristine and contains many non-historic elements, the proposed changes would drag the house even farther from its historic roots, contravening the purpose of landmark designation. Additionally, we are deeply concerned about and object to the proposed excavation. This is the exact type of fragile early 19th century structure, which in too many recent cases has been undermined by such work. Such excavation has also too often undermined or damaged adjacent structures of a similar vintage. We fear the same happening here. There have already been complaints from neighbors about damage to their buildings from work here and at the adjacent LPC approved project at 182, 186 Spring Street. We do not want another tragedy on our hands. Thus, we urge the Commission not to approve this application without significant changes, refinements, and safeguards added. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from John Graham from the VSNY. So John Graham, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. The VSNY supports all of the proposed changes to the front facade. This building has suffered through so many previous alterations, including the conversion of the ground floor to commercial use, the removal of the brownstone sills and lintels, the installation of new brick cladding, and the construction of a street-facing attic dormer that it seems the only original features still in place on this facade are the window openings on the second and third floors. The applicant has left these openings and proposes a new facade which is sympathetic to the vernacular federal style of the house and to this historic district in terms of its proportions, materials, details, and finishes. However, we do not support the proposed changes at the rear of the building or agree to the statement which the applicant just made that there are no historic features still left on the rear facade. Even if the proposed rear addition is not visible from the street because of the approved new building going up next door, it will overwhelm this diminutive federal era building, eliminate the entire historic rear facade, extend the rear facade plane at all floors, including the top floor, and thus significantly alter the building's character and diminish the remaining open space at this end of the interior of the block, and eliminate the historic pitched roof, a significant feature of houses of this age and type. The new rear facade design does not call to mind historic row houses, and as we and others consistently note, a full cellar excavation at a building this old is always a risk. We ask that the rear addition be significantly redesigned and reduced in scope, and that the historic pitched roof be retained. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And I'm looking through the attendee list now. I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends the following: approval of the front facade restoration above the ground floor, denial of the design for the ground floor unless the horsewalk door is retained. The central window is a historic double hung window. The entrance door has historic detailing, and the steps are in brownstone, and the brownstone detailing extends to grade, all of which would together recreate the original design. Approval of the demolition of the non-historic rear wall, the extensions and excavation of the cellar and a portion of the garden, provided that care is taken to do no harm of the building or adjacent properties, and denial of the rear windows, and recommends that in their place, the basement and parlor floors have less industrial appearance, and that the upper floors and the dormer have windows with a clear historical reference. We also received 2 letters from individuals recommending denial. And I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you, Gregory. All right, I'd like to turn back to the applicants and ask if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
I think that one thing that I would really like to respond to is the undermining of the foundation, that we are specifically creating haunch footings at the existing cellar level to not affect the foundation at our at the 190 spring side up until where we are past that building, and then extending out only afterwards with the full height cellar, and that the 182 through 186 side is currently being having a new building built up against this as well. So we are trying to take concern with what is the existing foundations and how we undermine or do not undermine the existing cellar level. From the front facade, I think that this was something that we've discussed, and we initially did propose something similar to what was existing, and it just didn't really work with the design, with having that door to the left in the existing location, at least. So, I mean, again, then you're kind of creating a fake history if we're then trying to align a new door horse path with the windows above. So we thought at least this is something that is matches what a federal style building would typically look like.
Yeah, and additionally, in our during our community board review, yes, we had kept the existing fenestration. We were trying to work with it, and we realized the importance of the horse walk, but they had kind of steered us in this more appropriate traditional direction, which we think does have more rhythm. But at the end of the day, yes, it does end up moving that that existing fenestration.
Just to ask a question about that, I know that the door to the former horse walk is there. Is the pathway still there as well,
No.
or it's all interior
No,
space now?
it's all interior space. It's actually, that door goes right to where the stair currently is.
Okay.
There's no pathway.
Okay.
Also, just to note, on the rear, we are keeping the rear pitched roof location. We are proposing to just raise the dormer height itself and just widen it slightly to provide, I mean, right now the ceiling height at the edge of the dormer is 7 feet. I think it's at its highest point 8 feet. So we just are trying to provide a standard height, ceiling height within that space. And I think just, you know, from this is a good way to kind of see comparatively to what, you know, the neighboring, again, 182, 186 Spring Street building will be up against ours, including this bay window that overhangs over our building. And keeping with the brick that matches 190 Spring, at least will help kind of detract from the visibility of 182 through 186 from that building.
Okay. All right, commissioners, any final questions? All right, I don't see any final questions, so I think we'll move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. All right, so Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. The proposed work, this proposal has components at the front, the roof and the rear, and the excavation as well. So we'll want to address all 4 areas of work. The work at the front, you know, I would just say we've had a lot of discussion about horse walks in recent applications. And I think that in a recent one where we did require the applicants keep the horse walk, that was because the actual passageway still existed. But there have been other times when the commission has reviewed applications where there's a door, but the horse passage is gone, and the interior, and it's been incorporated into the interior, where the commission has allowed fenestration changes on the rear facade. The proposal, as I said, includes the full height rear yard addition, the dormer at the rear of the roof being expanded, and the excavation. And I would just say that to the extent that any excavation is approved here, this is an application that would require and would have a full enhanced and coordinated engineering review with our colleagues at the forensic engineering unit at DOB as well. Okay, as well as LPC. So with that, we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Sure, thank you. I'm sad that the community board led the applicants in the way that they did. So I think that it led to a scenographic restoration or renovation as opposed to one that stuck to the evidence. And I would urge the applicant to stick to the evidence. The evidence seems to have been that there was this tripartite opening on the ground level that incorporated a horse walk. And the project it makes me think of is another one that I think is in this district on McDougal Street that we looked at a few years ago, where there was another retail infill of a federal building that had been modified on the lower level, where they basically made a combination of paneled storefront-like entrances and glass that was either clear or frosted to
retain the historic configuration while making it appropriate for residential use. I think that that's the way to go here as well. I really think that because we have evidence of a historic, if not original, retail tripartite opening series on the ground level, I think that that would be preferable from a preservation perspective to a wholly recreated out of our imagination base to the building. So unless evidence could be procured that showed that this building had this base, which I may have missed, I don't think I saw that, I would prefer to go back to what we know was there.
Okay, any thoughts on the additions? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm muted. Totally forgot. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, totally not the right way to go. The top dormer should be narrower so that the roof is not merely a fragment remnant, but is, I would say, of equal width to the current width of those gray panels to the left and right of the windows. It should be substantial. The central element should read as a dormer, not as a roof. And that's a matter of proportion. I also think it should be set back a little bit from the former edge of the building, edge of the roof of the building, and that the top floor of the building should be retained in its current plane. Since the windows up there were clearly modified, the applicant can come back to us with a more restorative approach for the top level. But I think it's very important, especially in a federal period house, that the volume of the house remain clear and discernible from all available sides. I really don't have an opinion on the glass quantity on the lower levels, and I don't think that we should impose upon them a standard that is different than we've imposed upon others, which is to be rather lenient on the quantity of glass on the lower levels, as long as there's a level of proportion, etc. But I think that the top floor of the main structure should be retained, and the roof element should be reduced so that it reads clearly as a dormer. Thank you for reminding me.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I total agreement with Michael's critique.
Okay. Commissioner Chu?
I'm in agreement about the front facade. I think it's a tough challenge, but I do think if you even look back at the historic timeline image of the 1824 and 1939 picture, I think with some revision, the proposed could really recall the original condition of the building. The rest of the discussion about lintels, I'm fine with. On the rear facade, I think because the additions essentially seem, or the alterations change every floor, it feels like the existing historic building has been shrouded completely. And I do think I agree with the comments that the top existing mass should remain with the existing pitch. There was an image shown as an example on the applicant's last deck slide, which showed a precedent. Yes, and in the upper right, it shows the approved proposal, which does retain the top, which I think is really my biggest complaint about the proposal. If I look directly below, is that I don't even recognize this from this side as a historic building anymore.
Okay, great. Commissioner Lutfi?
I spent a lot of time thinking about this this horse walk pathway, because as you said, Commissioner, Chair Carroll, we just dealt with this recently, and in that particular situation, behind the wall was a pathway. But the use of this house has now changed, and that square footage has been incorporated into the house, and it might be possible to redesign the front facade so that it recalls what was here originally in a way that works. But I would feel I could accept the front being modified so that it is more in keeping with a traditional federal style building. And actually, I think they've done a very good job of it. The back is something different for me. I mean, I happen to agree with what's been said here. If you look at this, not only on 23 and 24, but also on page 14, you completely lose the fact, this is a situation that we try to avoid all the time, where the original scale and of the building is, we try to maintain it, and it's completely lost here. You would never know it's a federal style building. So I would recommend that we lose the floor at the top. And I do agree about narrowing the dormer. And then I also, though, agree that I don't have a big problem with what's going on the lower floors with the windows, because we are rather flexible about that. And I also am hopeful about the monitoring of the excavation, because I know that we put the proper and people in place, and so to oversee it, and so does DOB.
Okay, thank you. And of course, we have enhanced all of our efforts in that work as well.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chapin. Yeah.
Sorry. I basically agree, going back to Commissioner Goldblum's remarks at the beginning. And first on the horse walk, because this is such an old building, and these horse walks are kind of rare special features. I think it really should be retained. And it sounded like the applicant actually was going in that direction. The community board steered them away from it. So I think that should be retained.
The door opening.
Yeah, and my biggest, they could obviously adjust what they need to within to, accommodate that. I also agree that we should not lose the sense of the volume, the original volume. This house is really being dwarfed by the proposed changes, and that's principally to do with changing the roof line and the big dormer at the back. So that needs to be addressed. And let's see what else. That my main issues, like Commissioner Goldblum and Commissioner Chu, is that you should be able to read the original volume of the house. And the glass, the modern glass at the back is that's something we've approved. I don't have a problem with that. Is that everything, Sarah?
Yep, and the dormer you addressed, right? So I think that's everything. Okay.
Yeah, and keeping, so that the roof line can in the original volume can read clearly. I don't know if that involves losing any height in the back. What the discussion was about that. I'm just trying to get a look at it. But okay. I agree basically with Commissioner Goldblum's remarks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Master.
Yeah, so when I first looked at this, I liked the proposed. I thought that the federal style row house was very attractive and kind of in keeping, with the era. And I thought it was aesthetically better than what was there now. However, Commissioner Goldblum is very convincing. And so after listening to his comments and the other comments, I think that some way to honor the horse walk if we can incorporate that into the design element, does make sense. And in terms of the excavation and the rear facade, I also agree with Commissioner Goldblum's comments.
Okay. All right. So I think what we have a number of suggestions or recommendations for each component of this proposal. So I think that we'll take no action. We'll ask the applicants to restudy the ground floor to include an opening that is an opening that recalls or is the same opening as the historic horsewalk door, but with some infill that relates to the historic windows in current use. And then to reduce the rear yard addition by a floor, reduce the height and width of the dormer at the rear. And we'll ask them to come back to us with a revised proposal to show us that. So we'll take no action and we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 10, LPC 23-07522. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 828, lot 38, 222 Fifth Avenue in the Ladies Mile Historic District. This is a Beaux-Arts style store and loft building designed by John C. Westervelt and built in 1912. And the application is to construct a rooftop addition.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and the staff will be taking you through the presentation. Michelle, you may begin.
Thank you, Abby. Good afternoon, commissioners. Michelle Shabrami of the preservation staff. The application before you is 222 Fifth Avenue, which is located in the Madison Square North Historic District. The proposed work includes the construction of a rooftop addition, which the top portion of the addition will be minimally visible over the primary facade at a distance within Madison Square Park. This shows the location of the building and circa 1940s tax photo of the building. The addition does not comply with the staff level rules because of an existing one-story addition and because the proposed addition is visible from a public thoroughfare. This shows the surrounding context. The addition will only be visible from Madison Park at the location labeled C in yellow. This shows the mock-up and visibility in photograph J. It's a zoomed in image of photo C so that you can locate the visible portion of the mock-up, which is in the white color. The addition will be clad with a beige colored stucco. This is the 5th floor plan. This is the penthouse plan at the roof. This shows the roof plan with materials and finish. This is the existing section. This is the proposed section. A sightline study from directly across the street. And existing elevation on the left and proposed on the right. So a reminder that the addition does not comply with staff level rules because there is an existing one-story rear addition and because the proposed addition is visible from a public thoroughfare. The architect Mike Rosani of Michael Zenreich Architects is here if there are questions.
Okay, commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? All right, I don't see any questions. Let's see if we have any public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We did not receive any signups beforehand for this item, and I am looking through our attendees list now, and I do not see any hands raised. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 5 recommends approval. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the only testimony we have is in support, but I would ask Mr. Rosani if you'd like to add anything at this time or make any final comments before we move to our discussion.
Thank you, Chair. Mike Rosani with Michael Zenreich Architects. As Michelle had mentioned, we had previously done this study last summer, and you can see in the photograph on the top left that the proposed mock-up was not visible due to the foliage of the trees. And then when we took photographs again last month, it became apparent that there's a portion of the fascia of the proposed roof of the penthouse was visible. And you can see that just below where it says photograph J, and that's highlighted as well in photograph O, which shows that portion of that fascia that was visible at certain times of year, when the trees are not in bloom. Outside of that, I think Michelle covered everything. If there's any specific questions, I'd like to answer them.
Okay, thanks. And commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, I think we'll move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. Right, and if you can all unmute yourself, Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion on this rooftop addition, which is set back from the front and the rear and really seasonally slightly visible over the front facade, but in the context of the much taller buildings that flank this building. And so we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Chu, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think that the addition is very minimal. From the sight lines shown, you can barely see it from within the park through the foliage. I think that aligning this mass with the existing bulkhead makes sense, reduces it as seeming a separate element. I see that they've indicated as stucco, I would say, to match the same color as the bulkhead, so they don't become two different colors. But otherwise, I don't have any issues. I think it's appropriate.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum?
Hold on a second. Am I muted? Oh,
Nope.
I'm not muted. Good. Okay, good. I have no problem with this. I think it's appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
I agree. I think it's minimal and appropriate and, not very visible.
Commissioner Jefferson?
Appropriate.
Commissioner Lutfi?
I agree, it's appropriate.
All right, and Commissioner Master?
Appropriate.
Okay, yeah, I think it's this one view that's such a great distance and it really will blend away and recede from view. So Commissioner Chu, would you read the motion?
Sure. In the case of, make sure I've got the right one here. LPC 23 07522 222 Fifth Avenue, Ladies Mile Historic District, a Beaux-Arts style store and loft building designed by John C. Westervelt and built 1912. Application is to construct a rooftop addition. I find that the application is appropriate, noting that the work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed addition will be set back from front and rear facades, maintaining visual cues to the building's historic mass, that the addition will only be minimally visible from public thoroughfares at a distance against the background of a taller secondary facade, that the simple design and neutral finish of the addition will further help it to recede from view, that the cumulative effect of the proposed rooftop addition and existing rear addition will not overwhelm the building, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special character of the building or the Ladies Mile Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 7 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you. And
Thank
we'll
you.
move to the, thanks. We'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 11, LPC 23-06004. This is an application for an amendment. It's in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1127, Lot 1, 43 West 74th Street in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. This is a Renaissance Revival style row house designed by Max Hensel and built in 1889 to 90. The application is to amend Certificate of Appropriateness 22-01235 to expand the scope of work to construct a rooftop addition and alter a masonry opening.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Anna, you now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen and then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. The project team may begin, but please state your name for the record before you do so. Thanks.
Good afternoon, staff. This is Ana Paola Rojas with AGC Group.
Hi, this is Andres Cortez. I'm the architect of record on the project.
Please go ahead.
I think we have a little split control of the presentation, so we'll do our best to coordinate.
Well, if you click on the screen, you should be able to advance the slides.
Okay. I'm not, but maybe Anna can do that. Okay, so we are proposing a penthouse and elevator bulkhead addition to the top of this Renaissance Revival row house from approximately 1889, designed by architect Max Hensel. The proposal that we have before you now is focused only on the penthouse addition. We've previously obtained approvals for a full facade restoration and a reconstruction of the historic stoop at the front, as well as the elimination of a portion of the existing addition at the rear. We took that, if you look at the center plot plan there, we took about 50% of that addition in the back where the bay window protrudes. We took that down, and that was already previously approved under separate applications. So this focuses only on the penthouse and on the elevator bulkhead, and also on a window opening proposed at the rear facade on the top floor. If you go to the next slide, these are just contextual photos. Okay, so here is a photo illustration of the rear yard. You see our building there, 43 West 74, and the center slide is right in the middle, and that showed the previously existing addition, portion of the addition that's already been demolished. And to the left at 41 West 74th Street, you see that they have created sort of a window pattern there and window openings that are consistent with the window openings that we are producing at all of the floors on the new rear facade. I know that one of the concerns with the aspect of our proposal having to do with the window opening is that there's generally a desire to maintain a window line at the rear facade, and we tried our best to get these photographs to show that there's really not an existing window line to sustain, to maintain at the rear, because we have at 41 West 74th these enlarged openings, and then to the left as you move closer to the park, the building elevations change a little bit as you're going up the hill, and there's not really a uniform window line at the rear, which is why one of the reasons we believe we should be allowed to enlarge the top window that you'll see in a minute in the drawing. If you go to the next slide, Hannah, please. Yep, so something else to note is that the proposed penthouse and bulkhead actually all follow the LPC guidelines as we understood them regarding a 3-foot setback. We actually have a little bit more at the rear. We're setting it back 3 feet 8 inches at the back, and we maintained the height of the penthouse below the I think it's 11 feet that's permitted in the guidelines. So we actually stuck, close sort of to the letter in terms of what the LPC guidelines are for these additions. Okay, next, please. So here is the proposed, at the far right, the proposed front elevation with the addition and with the elevator bulkhead at the top. If you could go next. And okay, here at the rear, you see that the window on the far right, facade drawing there, the window, yeah, right there, the window on the left, on the top left below the penthouse addition, this is the one that we want to enlarge to match the window opening dimensions of the lower windows, just to have a more coherent
2D view of what this facade would be. Other than that, above that, all of the soldier masonry courses at the window and at the sill, and also the cornice detailing that we're proposing above that window is to match the existing cornice detailing that's there. Although it's sort of interrupted, if you look at the existing rear facade at the far left, you'll see that it's interrupted because there's currently sort of an ad hoc metal railing and sort of antiquated cornice that it just seems very pastiched on the top left there. So hopefully the extension of that detailing at the cornice and matching the window width at the rest of the facade will just make it more coherent. Okay, next, please. We, have the sight line drawing to indicate that it's not visible from public right of way, and then we've also constructed mock-ups to demonstrate that, to prove to everybody, including ourselves, that it won't be visible from across the street or anywhere really up and down the street. Okay, and next, please.
I believe the presentation is a little bit slow at the moment.
Okay, it's a little slow to load. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so here are photos of the mock-up, the full volume, and also photos from down below at the street, and the mock-up is not visible. Okay. And from a materiality perspective, we're looking to use masonry cladding at the penthouse addition to match the brick that we have at the rear facade. And for the elevator bulkhead, it'll be finished in hopefully an inoffensive stucco color. And just very simple detailing. This is a plan view, just explaining what's happening there in terms of use. And that sort of summarizes, I believe, the proposal. The final thing I'll say is that we did obtain support from the community board on this application, and believe that since it is not visible from the public right of way, and since we are following all of the dimensional criteria in the landmark guidelines for these penthouse additions, we believe that it's a suitable proposal for this building. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions at this time, so let's see if we have public testimony for this item. If you're in the meeting and wish to testify, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I'll turn it over to Gregory Kala to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a few signups in advance, so we'll be hearing from those people first. The first sign-up we received was from Madge Rosenberg from Manhattan Community Board 7. I do not see her hand raised. So we will go back to Madge and see if she rejoins the meeting. I think she might be having some difficulties. So the next up is Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HGC finds this rooftop addition largely appropriate with the exception of the bulkhead, which is too highly visible. In terms of the rear facade, the proposed multi-pane windows are inappropriate in this case. The simpler, previously approved rear facade treatment is preferable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And next up, we'll be hearing from Megan Fitzpatrick from Landmark West. So Megan Fitzpatrick, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Megan Fitzpatrick for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee always appreciates when the owner of a landmarked building goes the extra mile to try and restore the facade to its original condition, and we eagerly await the proposed project's finished results. It is a true gift to the neighborhood. It is refreshing to see the building once again align with adjacent buildings in the donut. However, it is curious to see the rear yard window fenestration design evolve to a multi-light configuration over its simpler predecessor. Our committee is concerned at the height of the addition and bulkhead of this row house. 43 West 74th Street was once divided into 15 separate apartments, and in its return to a single-family household, the needed expansion is surprising. Being that the addition is set back and not visible from the public thoroughfare, we find that in this instance, the proposed scope of work is acceptable. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee recommends approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And yep, I see Madge here. Madge is here now. So Madge Rosenberg from CB7, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm from CUNY Board 7, and I just want to reiterate what the architect said. We did approve it, and we thought that the rooftop addition was appropriate. We couldn't see it from the public way at all, and it was set back very well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Okay, I do not see any further hands raised, so I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. So we, I think, heard positive testimony in support from the Community Board and Landmarks West, but HDC did comment on the bulkhead as well as the fenestration pattern. But I just wonder if you can clarify the visibility, because they seem to think the bulkhead would be visible, and then you can address any other comments you like.
Yes, so the mock-up does account for the bulkhead height. One thing that I didn't mention is, and I can't, Anna, can we show photos of that mock-up, please? Is that to our, yes, right there on the top left image, you see that our neighbor on 41 West 74th has a very large addition constructed there. And that is also not visible from the street. And then on the bottom right image there of the mock-up, you see that we did model or construct what the elevator bulkhead is in massing, and we're able to confirm that, and in fact we placed it such that it would not be visible from the public right of way. So unfortunately elevators need these bulkheads. We would love for it to be smaller, but hopefully we were intentional in setting this back far enough so that it's not visible at all from public right of way.
Okay, all right, thank you. And commissioners, are there any final questions? All right, so I think we will go ahead and move to our discussion. So if you can all unmute yourself. And Commissioner Chu, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Oops, any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And just to be clear, there is a proposed, the middle elevation here is what was previously approved by the commission in a prior application. The proposal today includes a rooftop addition, again, setback from the front and the rear, and a stair bulkhead, neither of which are visible from a public way. And these would technically meet the rules, except for that the staff is not authorized to issue a permit for a rooftop addition if there's an existing rear yard addition. So we're looking at it for that reason, but it otherwise meets the rules. The other thing that we're looking at is the enlargement of the window opening on the rear facade. The staff is not authorized to approve enlarging the top floor window openings, but the other windows that are the multi-light windows that are going within existing openings are all eligible for staff level review. So we're really focusing on that top floor window and the rooftop addition. And I would note that there are two adjacent full height rear yard additions. And, one of the reasons that the staff can't approve modifying the top floor of window openings is that often in row houses, there is a continuity in the row that's legible through the fenestration pattern. And that's what that is intended to preserve. In this case, there are two full height rear yard additions that change the plane and conditions at the top floor of the rear facade. So that's something you may factor in as you consider this. So we'll begin our discussion. Again, it's the top floor window and the rooftop addition. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. The rooftop addition and the bulkhead, not visible, I can approve that. I'm a little concerned about the top floor window changes because I assume that the rule was that you always wanted to keep the existing mass of the existing building. And when I look at the three images, it seems that they have changed from the first to the second to the third. And
right, so the massing doesn't, the plane will stay the same. It's just enlarging the opening. Yeah, and I think maybe if we go to the photographs to show the context, that would help in the conversation. There we go. Oops. Sorry. At the top photograph in the center is the building, and then the two adjacent full height rear yard additions.
I see. Okay. I can go back to the elevation. Okay, and I could accept it, and there's a certain cohesiveness to this facade that I like. It all seems to work together as one, so I can accept that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah. In this case, I don't have any issues. I think about retaining the windows, that those are fine because of the context. And I guess my only question would be if the bulkhead is perhaps larger than necessary, I think it'd work with staff to reduce it, but I don't have any, because of the lack of visibility in general, I really don't have any problem with the entire project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
I just want to comment that I know this block very well. It's actually a beautiful block, and it's a park. It's between Columbus and the park, and it's very well taken care of. And I appreciate the fact that the applicant is trying to take care in their work. We have nothing to do with the facade, but I guess they have been doing work on the facade as well. So I appreciate that. Anyway, I think this is a very good project. I mean, the work on the top in terms of the addition and the bulkhead is not visible. And it seems everything they've done seems reasonable to me. And I don't have a problem with the fact that the windows on the back were changed to multi-light. The windows that were there don't look like they were really original to begin with. And I don't have a problem with the fact that they enlarged that one window. I think now the fenestration is more consistent. So I can prove this.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree. I think it's appropriate as presented.
Commissioner Chu.
I think it's appropriate.
Commissioner Master.
I agree. It's appropriate.
Okay, so I think we can move to approve this one. Commissioner Jefferson, are you comfortable reading the motion? Okay, thanks.
In the matter of LPC -23-06004, 43 West 74th Street, Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. Application is to amend a certificate of appropriateness 22-01235 to expand the scope of work to construct a rooftop addition after and alter masonry openings.
So he is
I note that the building scale, style, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historical character of the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed rooftop addition and bulkhead will not be visible from any public thoroughfares, that the rooftop addition will be modest in size and set back from the front and rear facades, that the simple massing of red brick and beige stucco material and punch opening at the proposed rooftop addition and bulkhead will be keeping with massing and material of rooftop additions found throughout the historic district. That the row house is located between two other row houses featuring full height rear yards addition. Therefore, enlarging the top floor masonry openings will not disrupt a uniform fenestration pattern across the top floors of this row, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historical character of the historic district.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved, and we'll move to the next item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is public hearing item number 12, LPC 23-07790. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1408, lot 27. 167 East 73rd Street, the 167 East 73rd Street building individual landmark. It's a Beaux-Arts style carriage house designed by George L. Armoreau and built in 1903 to 4. And the application is to install flagpoles and signage.
Great, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing and the staff will be taking you through the presentation. Dana, if you could just click on your screen.
Flat area up to your side entrance, from crown to your side.
Dana, if you could just.
I think.
Perfect, great. Please state your name for the record. You may be.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dana Litowitz, Preservation Staff. The item before you is for 167 East 73rd Street, an individual landmark located on the north side of the street between Lexington and 3rd Avenues. As the future home of the Consulate General of the Slovak Republic, the proposal is to install flagpoles and signage at the primary facade. For your reference, here are the historic tax photos and a recent photo. This item is before you today because the flagpoles and signage plaque size, which is 10 inches by 24 inches, do not meet the Commission's rules for staff level approval. Signage plaques measuring 12 inches by 18 inches or less can be approved at staff level. The applicant has also submitted for facade restoration and interior alterations, which are being reviewed at staff level. Here are some context photos, the streetscape and the building. And here is an existing condition photo. The new 10-foot double outrigger flagpole is proposed to be anchored to the skyward facing surface of the molded projecting limestone sill at the second floor. The Ministry of the Interior of the Slovak Republic requires the nation's consulates to publicly display both the national flag and the flag of the European Union per their 2004 EU membership treaty. A new brushed stainless steel signage plaque is proposed to be pin mounted to the right of the main entrance. The dark bronze anodized aluminum flagpole will sit on a steel base plate and be mounted at a 45-degree angle to the sill. The fabric flags will measure 4 by 6 feet. The signage plaque will measure 10 inches by 24 inches, similar in size to the ghosting from the previous signage plaque. It will be held off the limestone 3/4 of an inch to each side and will feature etched and paint-filled lettering. Other EU members have consulates on the Upper East Side, including Italy, France, and the Czech Republic, as seen here. Each building features 2 individual flagpoles, and the French consulate has 2 signage plaques flanking the main entrance. Here is an existing, apologies, here is an existing view at an oblique angle of the building, and here is a rendering of the proposed alterations. The applicants are here to answer any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions, so let's see if we have any public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Gregory to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a couple of signups beforehand, so we'll be hearing from those people first. The first signup was Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. The precedent images in this proposal show the appropriate siting for flags. They should be installed between the windows as they are in the reference images. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Nuha Ansari from the Friends of Upper East Side. So Nuha Ansari, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Chair Carroll and Honourable Commissioners, my name is Nuha Ansari and I am speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. As the home of our founder, Helena Rosenthal, who also served as president of the 73rd Street Block Association, this street and the extraordinary carriage houses that line it between Lexington and 3rd Avenues have always held a particular interest for us at Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. We welcome the Consulate General of the Slovak Republic to this historic stretch. We commend the applicants on their subtle and elegant solution to the challenge of installing 2 flagpoles on the ornate entrance of this Beaux-Arts style carriage house. The use of a single mounting for the flagpoles and the effort to ensure that the poles do not extend too far from the entrance are appreciated and will not detract from the character of the building. In addition, the signage to the right of the entrance in stainless steel with recessed black lettering is subtle and fitting on this historic facade. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And I'm looking through the list of attendees right now to see if we have any further hands raised. I do not see any. So I will just note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends approval. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much, Gregory. All right, so the testimony was fairly supportive of the presence of the flagpoles, but I'd like to ask the applicant if they would like to speak or either address the comments. There was a comment about the location or make any other final comments before we begin our discussion.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Hello, this is Joe Gattuso, architect for the owner. Regarding the placement of the flags, yes, 2 of the precedent images shows flags between the windows. One precedent shows flags projecting from the windows, including a double outrigger on a separate set of windows. That's the Italian consulate. If we tried to we did look at these between the windows, but the left-hand flag would conflict with the existing tree. And we felt that it was a bit more appropriate to scale to place them both in smaller outriggers from the center of the building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioners, do we have any final questions?
Thank you.
All right, I think we'll go ahead and move to our discussion. So if you can all unmute yourself. All right, and Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as has been noted, this is a proposal for 2 flagpoles for this consulate building. And as we know, there are many consulates on the Upper East Side. We've seen some examples of those. This is a former carriage house, and I think the applicants have thought about the scale of the building as they've considered sort of the installation, location, and type. So I think that was a helpful response to the testimony about the idea of moving them away and doing them between the windows. So we'll have our discussion on the flagpoles. Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, sure. I think it's totally appropriate. The installation is going to be made in a non-intrusive way that does not damage the facade or historic material. And this is a very typical installation for a consulate or embassy. So I think it's totally appropriate.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I forgot to mention, we also should comment on the plaque. So if you.
Yes, I was including the plaque.
Oh, okay.
Along with the,
okay, great.
With the flags that it also was to be installed in a non-intrusive fashion.
Great, thank you. All right, Commissioner Lutfi.
I agree with Commissioner Chapin. First of all, this carriage house is lovely. I mean, it's just beautiful. And I think the applicant has done a great job. And I think the location is perfect. Like your eye just goes to that central point where they have decided to mount both of those flags. And, you know, they're not too big. They're just very well situated. And the plaque is so understated, you can almost miss it. I think it's perfect.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Okay, I think it's appropriate, but I think what it does, it draws the eye to the flags and not to the facade, but it's appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree. I think it's appropriate. Channeling Fred again, I think that he would say that it's removable. It's not a major intrusion on the architecture. So I think that even though it is a little bit loud, I think it's appropriate.
Commissioner Chu.
I think it's appropriate. My only comment, and I defer to the other commissioners here, is that I did find the stainless steel choice a little bit jarring. The facade is so beautiful, it almost has a patina to it, and I feel like the bronze was indicated a bronze anodized or something for the flagpoles, and I'm wondering why there isn't more consistency with that finish.
Okay, I don't know if Corey, if you have any information on the choice, or Dina.
I mean, I think the notes say it's a cast aluminum pole and escutcheon with a dark bronze anodized finish on that.
Right.
So it may all have a dark finish, I think is the intent.
Okay, and Commissioner Master.
I find it appropriate.
Okay. Okay, so I think we can go ahead and approve this. Commissioner Chapin, would you make the motion?
Sure. Just a moment. Okay, in the matter of certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 23-07790, 167 East 73rd Street, 167 East 73rd Street building, individual landmark, a Beaux-Arts style carriage house designed by George L. Amaru and built in 1903 to 1904. Application is to install flagpoles and signage. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural or historical features, that the presence of flagpoles on a building converted from a carriage house to an institutional use has precedent throughout the Upper East Side, which features other buildings adapted and occupied by diplomatic missions, that the placement of the flagpoles will be compatible with the ordered design of the facade and is in keeping with the traditional placement of flagpoles at diplomatic missions, that the flagpoles will be simply designed and well scaled to the building, that the proposed plaque sign will be anchored in plain masonry and will be in keeping with previous signage at the building in terms of placement, size, and type, that the size of the plaque is well scaled to the entrance, and that the proposed work will not diminish the special historic and architectural character of this individual landmark.
Right, thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's
Thank
approved.
you.
Thank you. And we'll move to the next and final item for today.
And that is public hearing item number 13, LPC 23-05878. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1505, lot 28, 63 East 93rd Street in the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. This is a Renaissance revival style row house designed by A.B. Ogden and Son and built in 1891. The application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. Joseph, you now have control of the presentation. If you could just click on your screen. Great, you can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. The project team may begin, but please state your name for the record before you do so.
Okay, before we get started, can we unmute Valerie Campbell?
I'm unmuted.
Oh,
Thank-
okay, she was
so-
actually going to begin.
So I was going to start today. Good afternoon. My name is Valerie Campbell. I'm a partner at Kramer Levin, and I'm land use counsel to the owners of 63 East 93rd Street, Chris Chan and Libby Cantrell. This application proposes a full height rear extension and a new stair bulkhead, which will provide access to the roof. Before we go into the application, I wanted to make a few comments. As originally filed and presented to the community board, the application included a full width penthouse addition. This addition would have blocked 2 lot line windows of the adjacent building, which appear to be historic in terms of their detailing and size. As many members of the commission know, lot line windows and other lot line design features are not protected by law. However, in response to the concerns raised by the adjacent neighbor, the community board, and the Carnegie Hill neighbors about the potential loss of the lot line windows, the owners agreed to modify the application to eliminate the penthouse addition, which was a full room, and replace it with a stair bulkhead, which is not occupiable, but merely provides access to the roof. The neighbors at 65 East 93rd Street have also asked us to consider a further revision to the stair bulkhead. Basically, they've asked us to slope it. While there wasn't enough time to redo the application materials to accommodate this request, we have studied this modification, and the owner would be willing to make this change if the commission finds it appropriate. In community board terms, we would consider it to be a friendly amendment. Joe Tanney, the architect, can describe how this would change what you're seeing today in more detail. So to get back to the application, you see it's 63 East 93rd is a single family home. It's located on the north side of East 93rd Street between Madison and Park Avenues. It was constructed in 1891 and designed by Ogden and Son. It is a contributing building in the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District and is described as having a Renaissance revival style. To give you a sense of the historic context, it's part of a block that's changed dramatically over time. The 1911 map shows a mixture of row houses, French flats, and tenements. And one interesting fact is that 63 East 93rd Street is not, as you might think, associated with the 3 houses to the east, located at 5761 East 93rd Street. These, or actually they're to the west, excuse me. These row houses were built as a row of 3 in 1886. Number 63 was actually associated with 65 East 93rd Street, which was built at the same time and under the same buildings department application and as 63. 65 was originally a considerably larger 2-family row house with a brownstone facade. but it was altered in 1930 and is now in an apartment building. So the top map is from 1911. The bottom map is from 1939. And as you can see, the eastern edge of the block along Park Avenue had changed dramatically with the erection of the large apartment building and the expansion of the Russian Orthodox Church. And you will also see that 65 East 93rd Street's brownstone facade had been removed by 1939. So next slide. This shows the current context. The northern half of the block is not in the historic district and exhibits substantial change. Most notably, you see the 32-story Carnegie Hill Tower at 40 East 94th Street. Carnegie Hill Tower incorporates a public open space, or POPS, which serves both as a plaza and a public passageway between East 93rd Street and East 94th Street between 9 a.m. and sunset. There are seasonal views, and you can sort of see the view shed here into the center of the block from the POPS. You can also see on this map that 57 East 93rd Street has a full-height rear extension. This was approved by the Commission in 1997 pursuant to a certificate of appropriateness. Now, Joe Tani, the architect, will describe the building and the application in more detail.
We'll start with the street elevation. This sheet shows the front elevation of the building in its immediate context. You see 55 East 93rd Street, known as the Alamo, to the left, and then the three row houses built in 1886. The middle of these, number 59, was altered in 1939. All of these row houses have lost their stoops. Number 63, our building looks a little orphaned because this is, as Valerie was talking about, this was connected through a brownstone facade in 65, which was then changed in the 30s. Here you see the 1940 tax map and the 1985 tax map. These are more views of the front facade of East 93rd. We're not proposing any work to the front of the building at this time. We are doing a window replacement under a separate application. Here are views of the rear facade. The facade has been painted. At some point, the building got a small basement extension, provides a small terrace for the first floor. There's also a small balcony at the second floor, which also appears to be a later addition. All the windows have seemed to have been replaced at one time or another. And the two-story rear extensions at 59 and 61 currently extend deeper into the rear yard, as does number 65. Number 63 and, 63 is only 15 feet wide and 55 feet, 4 inches overall. You can see the existing plan at the top. The existing garden in the back is 45 feet, 3 inches by 14 feet wide. And you can see it's at 15 feet wide. It's a rather small house. No excavation is proposed as part of the application, but the basement through the third floor levels would be extended 15'3" at the rear. This would accommodate the required 30-foot rear yard and would also align with the neighboring extension at 61. This is the ground floor plan, existing and proposed, and the second floor, and the third floor, and the roof. You can see the existing roof plan. It has skylights, some mechanical, and a hatch is the only way you can access the roof at this time. The proposed stair bulkhead is 4 feet 11 wide and 21 feet 1 inches long. There's a small HVAC unit just north of the bulkhead, and we are proposing solar panels on the roof of the rear extension. Here's an existing and a proposed front elevation. The bulkhead is not visible from the street and is 9 foot 9 inches away from the from 65's exterior wall. Here's an existing rear elevation that shows the building in context. All of the rear facades have been altered, and there's a variety of window types and sizes. As Valerie mentioned, the commission approved a full height rear extension for number 57 in 1997. While there is some general alignment of the floor levels, the windows in the line of the cornice of 63 do not align with that of its neighbor 61. The proposed rear elevation is red brick with multi-paned windows. You can see the stair bulkhead above. The new windows will help bring in light into the interior. This is on the north facade, and they work nicely with the other multi-pane windows that are found on the other rear facades. The traditional materials proposed for the extension are compatible with the neighbors, and the detailing is appropriate. I mentioned the red brick. The windows will have black frames. We have stone sills and a brick soldier course for the lintels across the top. We have stone coping, and we're planning for a light gray stucco on the bulkhead. This existing section shows the lot line windows that Valerie mentioned earlier. They're in the middle of the building, and they're not easily seen from the street. This section shows a proposed rear extension and the adjustments we're making to the roof level behind the existing front cornice, which is quite high. We've kept the roof of the extension to the height of the existing rear cornice line. This section shows the stair bulkhead, which is 9 foot 10 inches high. There's a mechanical unit just north of the bulkhead. As Valerie mentioned, the owners of number 65 have asked us to consider an angled bulkhead, which we have studied and we find acceptable. It will basically be sloped with a skylight, and the exterior would be clad in a light gray metal. We're proposing zinc. The bulkhead mock-up is not visible from the street nor from the rear yard of 63. It is minimally visible from the public open space, and I'll show that in a few minutes. Here's the mock-up on the roof as designed in this particular presentation. It also shows the lot line windows. This is the mechanical unit. The bulkhead is 9 foot 9 from the wall, as shown in the plans, and although in this photograph it looks closer. Here is a 3D model of the back facades. It's sort of like a bird's eye view of our proposed rear alterations. We think the proposed rear extension, it retains the individual row house scale and is compatible with the altered character of the block. We also think that having a full extension results in a simpler and better design than a step back addition. In this specific condition, in this context, we believe this is an appropriate extension. We'll now go to the public open space. First, I'm going to show you the entry from 93rd Street. As Valerie mentioned, it's open from 9 a.m. to sunset, at which time they lock the gates. You can see them on both sides of the entry. You go down some short stairs twice, and the majority of the Pops is not in the historic district. It ends at that extension you could see here at the bottom of those stairs. This is the covered entry from 94th Street. You can look in and see the public open space through the gates here. They're also locked, open from 9 a.m. to sunset. This is a winter view from the center of the Pop space from entering from 93rd Street. There's a raised stepped area in the corner, that upon people sit on it, and when you're on top of it, it provides views right into the center of the block. Here's a photo of the stair bulkhead mock-up, which you see in orange. Can be seen from this part of the pop space. And here's a rendered view. And even in the winter, this photograph was taken just last week. This is the rendering. Even in the winter, the tree branches obscure much of the view, but you will be able to discern the addition behind the branches, and this visibility may vary depending on the weather and the time of the day. So here's the rendering with white outlines marking our building and the others in the context. And finally, this is a photo taken in summer. It shows that the center of the block is almost completely obscured when the trees are fully leafed. And that's our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions from the commissioner.
All right, thank you very much. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Lutfi, followed by Commissioner Jefferson.
So when you slope the addition, the bulkhead, how is that going to affect the visibility? Do you have any idea?
You can't see it now from the street. Are we talking from Pops?
I think from the Pops, it's the only place where you would see it.
Exactly.
Okay,
Right.
let's go back there.
You would see less of it if you go back, because it would be, the rear would slope back.
That's what I was wondering. Okay.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Jefferson.
Well, that was my question. You would see it from the public way? You would see the roof addition, or would you not see the roof addition?
from the pop space, you will see the bulkhead. Yes. And you might, and you will see the extension too at certain times of the year, depending, it's kind of a seasonal weather dependent view. One thing I think to note about the extension is that it is right now, what you see where the extension is a blank brick lot line wall of number 65.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? All right, let's see if we have public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, and I will turn it over to Gregory to take us through the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We received a number of signups beforehand for this item, so we will be hearing from those signups first. The first signup is from Lo Vandervalk from Carnegie Hill Neighbors. So Lo Vandervalk, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you. Hello, Lo Vandervalk, are you with us?
Yes. Sorry for that. My name is Lo Vandervalk. I'm speaking on behalf of Carnegie Hill Neighbors. We appreciate that the applicant has agreed to remove the top penthouse floor. This would have blocked 2 historic lot line windows facing west of number 55. We note that for the 4 sister row houses, none currently have a rooftop addition. However, we are opposed to the 4-story rear addition. Currently, there is no material rear buildup, and the rear facade is as built in 1891, except for a 3-foot garden extension. This is also true of the 2 adjacent row houses to the west, number 61 and 59, They both have two-story rear additions. All three rear facades are very visible from the public plaza. Allowing the four-story addition introduces a massing totally out of context with the history of this building and of the two adjacent neighbors. The fourth row house, number 59, does have a four-story buildup done in around 1999, but it is far less visible from the public plaza because its view is blocked by the adjacent apartment building number 55, as seen on page 29 of the applicant presentation. Visibility from the public plaza, we believe, triggers a rationale for a stronger level of scrutiny on the part of the commission than would be the case of a view from the donut, which is not a public way. We note that CB8, after its detailed review, voted the proposal down unanimously as proposed. It did not split the application into rooftop only or rear additions only. Thus, in effect, it opposed both items. As a matter of history, the plaza creation was based on a separate zoning section for the permit. Provisions for this are contained in section 74-843 dated 1973. I'm just giving this for the public record. The plaza is noted in the MAS database for privately owned public spaces. Also, we note that CHN played a role in the creation of the plaza. This is noted in background documents from 1973 and can be found on the internet under the number FT-11000086292108. Finally, for all these reasons, we hope the commission will allow only the addition of 2 floors in the rear. Thank you for allowing this testimony.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we will be hearing from Nuha Ansari from the Friends of the Upper East Side. So Nuha Ansari, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Chair Carroll, Honourable Commissioners, my name is Nuha Ansari and I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Friends appreciates the applicant's consideration of the concerns expressed at the community board and their subsequent modification of the proposal to remove the penthouse addition to this Renaissance Revival townhouse, thereby preserving the height of the group of 4 late 19th century townhouses along this road. Friends Preservation Committee believes, however, that the modified proposal does not go far enough. The proposed 4-story rear yard addition represents a significant visual intrusion, both from the donut and also from the public path and plaza, and the path that goes from 93rd to 94th Streets. Within this context, a 4-story rear yard addition would destroy the small-scale composition formed by the interplay of the rear yards of these historic houses. It would be a disproportionate and heavy addition, highly visible from the public way, and one which would obscure the historic fabric that can currently be seen on the rear facade of the townhouse. Although there is a large rear yard addition at number 57, it is minimally visible from the public plaza. We feel that a 2-story addition instead of the proposed 4 would go a long way to preserving the character and balance of the townhouses as viewed from the mews, and would be consistent with the height of the neighboring rear yard additions. We also urge the applicant to amend the design of the stair bulkhead to a sloped roof in order to further minimize visibility. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Okay. And next up, we'll be hearing from John Graham from VSNY. So John Graham, I'll be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. Even were the proposed full height addition not visible from a public way, The Commission's usual approach of retaining at least the top floor of the historic rear wall should apply here. But because this rear wall is fully visible from a public place and is seen in the context of the original rear walls of two adjacent buildings, there's even more reason to deny the proposal. We also note that the top floor retains its original masonry openings, with the two floors below also intact except for a drop sill on each floor. Finally, there seems to be a historic cornice. All of this historic material and detail will be lost if this proposal is approved. We urge that the design be modified to retain more historic fabric, including the original top floor facade. Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Claire Brinberg. So Claire Brinberg, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello. Good afternoon, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. I'm Claire Brinberg, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of the Brinberg family, my brother Robert, and our mother Sybil. Together, we own 65 East 93rd Street, the building next door to 63 East 93rd. Our mother has lived in the building since the 1960s when she rented a studio apartment and fell in love with her landlord, our late father, Louis Brinberg. Now, at 50 years old, and despite our best efforts to bring in help, she is still there, still running the place all by herself. She's been doing it for 45 years. She's an incredible woman. Our building was designed and built in conjunction with 63 East 93rd Street. Over the century, it has been modified several times and now has 11 apartments, 6 of which are rent stabilized and bring in rent well below market rate. The 5th floor apartment is our jewel. So we were devastated when we learned that the applicant was planning to build a penthouse addition that would require us to brick up its 2 beautiful western-facing casement windows and install mechanical ventilation for the kitchen through the roof. Apart from its impact on our building, that penthouse addition would have been visible from the privately owned public space between 93rd and 94th Street, the Muse, and was not, in our opinion, appropriate. Rob and I made our case to Community Board 8, which agreed with us. Remarkably, our new neighbors heard us too and personally reached out. Our discussions with them have been friendly, positive, and productive. They agreed to eliminate the rooftop penthouse addition. Their proposal, which did leave a large kind of hulky bulkhead, was submitted to you on Friday while we were still in discussions. They have now agreed, as you've heard, to slope the roof of the bulkhead. Yesterday, we submitted to you a copy of the revised plan. I will show it to you now in this very low-tech way. The new slope bulkhead design is respectful of the neighboring historic buildings. We believe it will be minimally visible from the public Muse, and it allows our historic windows to remain visible from the Muse as well, while allowing light and air to enter the windows. All in all, we believe it is appropriate. What's more, the applicant is willing to investigate further whether the portion of the bulkhead directly in front of our northern windows can be shifted more to the south. It is rare for developers to be so responsive and willing to reach a mutually agreeable solution. We consider ourselves lucky to have such gracious new neighbors for our mother and for our building. For these reasons, we support the application our neighbors have submitted as modified by the slope bulkhead design, and we look forward to welcoming them to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. And next up, we'll be hearing from Andy Bellin. So Andy Bellin, I will be promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please state your name for the record and unmute your line, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, good afternoon, Commissioners, and thank you so much for what you do for our community. My name is Andy Bellin. I'm a longtime resident of the Upper East Side. I currently live at 965 Fifth Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District, where I am on the board. I am very familiar with the obligations and benefits of living in a historic district. I grew up at 1185 Park, which is one of the largest buildings in the Carnegie Hill Historic District. 1185 is located between 93rd and 94th Street, and our apartment actually looked out over 93rd Street. So I know the neighborhood and that street quite well. In my opinion, the proposed rear extension to 63 East 93rd Street is completely appropriate and a vast improvement over the existing rear facade, which is painted yellow mustard and altered openings and has sort of a tacked on balcony. The extension maintains a 30-foot rear yard, aligns with the adjacent rear extensions of its neighbors to the west, and will be seen only against the backdrop of a brick sidewall of its neighbors to the east. 65 East 93rd. 63 East 93rd Street is only 15 feet wide, so the proposed 15-foot rear extension will provide this small house for a more practical and useful purpose for the owners and their children. The extension's brick facade and multi-pane windows are consistent with the rear facades of many buildings on this block and are well scaled to this small row house. With respect to the views from the Carnegie Hill Tower public open space, I disagree that these views are significant given that this is not a pristine row house block by any stretch of the imagination. When the trees are fully leafed, the interior of the block is not visible. And even in winter, when many tree branches obscure much of the view. While the public space is a convenient passageway between 93rd and 94th Street and a nice space during the warmer months, the views onto the rear block are certainly not its main attraction. Finally, the owners have made significant changes to their original plans to accommodate the concerns of the community board and their neighbors about lot line windows at 65 East 93rd. And I think it's an appropriate application that deserves the commission's approval. And thank you guys so much for your time again.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. And I am looking through our attendees list right now. I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that we received the resolution from Manhattan Community Board 8 recommending denial. And we also received additional testimony from individuals, 2 of which recommended denial and 2 others recommending approval. And I will be sending it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you, Gregory. All right, I'd like to turn back to the applicants and ask if they'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
Yes, we would. First, just one clarification. The owner of number 63 is not a developer. It is a single family home, and it's a small family, you know, a mother and a father and 2 kids. So then with respect to the community board resolution, I would note that that resolution does reflect the original application, which included the full height penthouse extension. It certainly objected to that. It also had concerns about the full height rear extension, but some of the denial was certainly based on the penthouse. With respect to the full height rear extensions, I would submit that this row block is not a typical row house block like the commission often sees in Greenwich Village or Chelsea, or even, you know, in the Upper East Side and Carnegie Hill. But this one is really, it's altered. It has a variety of larger building types. The commission has approved, you know, numerous full height rear additions in the Upper East Side Historic District and in the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. In addition to the extension previously approved on this block for number 57, which you see at the right, the commission approved a full rear extension at 11 East 93rd Street. As designed, the extension preserves the 30-foot green space behind the existing row houses. In the visibility from the pop space, it's only going to be seen really against the backdrop of the larger brick lot line wall of 65 East 93rd Street. I think that the exteriors of the 4 existing row houses don't have a lot of distinguishing architectural detail. They've all been altered over time. And as noted before, 57 has a full height extension. Another factor is that 63 was not part of the row houses to the west, but was constructed under the same Department of Buildings application as number 65. And it never shared, but even though it was constructed at the same time, it never shared a rear facade with number 65, which was always built deeper into the lot. And you will also see that the windows, the top floor windows don't align with 61 or 59, and the cornice is slightly higher. And I don't think there is anything particularly distinguished about this cornice in terms of its detailing. We certainly know that the commission often asks for rear extensions to stop short of the top floor. But that is also usually an approval that's done in conjunction with a setback penthouse addition. I think the commission saw something like that today. We would submit that in this case, to the extent that you will be able to see it from the pop space, and we would not agree that that's a significant visibility. It's obscured for most of the year. We think the full height extension is actually more compatible perhaps than a stepped addition would be in this context. And finally, we believe that the materials and detailing of the proposed extension is very consistent with the row house scale. So we would ask that the commission sort of take note in the fact that in eliminating a penthouse addition to preserve these windows, the owners lost a full room at the top of the building. It is a very small house. The extension is only 15 feet. And I think it provides really sort of necessary space for their family. And we think that it is really totally appropriate given the context. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I don't see any final questions. That we'll move to our discussion. You can all accept my request to unmute. And Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as we've heard, it's for a full height rear yard addition. It's in a context of within the context of a block with varied building types, including some larger and deeper buildings around it. It does sit adjacent to a row, two of which don't have additions and the other end building does. And the proposal also includes a bulkhead at the roof that would be, I think they're proposing now to slope it. And these are not visible from surrounding streets, but are visible from this public open plaza space. And also visible, though, in the context of all of the other additions and buildings around it, and I gather somewhat seasonal. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lotfi, would you like to start this one?
Sure. First of all, I want to commend the applicant for working with its neighbors to modify the bulkhead so that it works better within the context surrounding it. I think, and I don't have a problem with this, the visibility of the slope bulkhead because it's minimal and it is within the context of this public space. I think the thing that I do think needs to be changed a little bit is the height of the extension, This is a small building. And I think a full height extension really overwhelms the volume of this building. So while I don't think that there's a problem in doing it, I happen to agree with some of the testimony that we've heard that we should take a floor off, that the applicant should take a floor off. That would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
There are two critical issues for me. One is the public space and the visibility, and the second is the height of the building. If we reduce it to 3 floors, the penthouse is going to be even more visible. I think if the diagram I drew here makes sense.
The bulkhead, yeah.
Yeah, it would be more visible. So the question is, I can accept the bulkhead, but I do think it should be reduced 1 floor or maybe even 2, because I'm not sure, it's an interesting issue because, the building to the 4-story one, 1995 or whenever it was approved, and the new one, 4-story, seemed to work in terms of architecture. But it doesn't work in terms of our guidelines. So I would say reduce it 1 floor.
Commissioner Chapin?
Well, in this context, I actually agree with much of the applicant's presentation. First of all, this is not part of a row, which is the thing that we most are concerned about in preserving the top floor. And also it was built in conjunction with 65, not 61 and 59 and 57. So I don't have any problem with actually a full height addition here. I think it's appropriate. This is a very small building. And I think that the space is very much, it's tiny in terms of its, because of its peculiar history, it's ended up being like 14 or 15 feet wide. There's very little space here. So I think a full height addition is appropriate. And I think what they've done with the bulkhead is good to make it work in the context here of a proposed penthouse, which would have been a different issue. So I'm actually comfortable with it as presented. I think that it's not going to be particularly intrusive from the public space. It'll kind of clean up the way things look, actually. And I don't think that the view from the public space is going to make it look make it call attention to itself because it's next to that larger building. And the tripartite division fits in with that as far as the windows and the 3rd floor there. And I just find it, I think it works. And I just would approve it as presented, but it sounds like we may not have the votes for that. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Goldblum.
I feel like others have that the top floor should come off. The reasoning for me is consistent that I think from a contextual point of view, like Diana said, and like Everardo said, the addition is fine as is. But the problem with it for me is that it erases completely the form and volume expression of the existing original historic structure. The historic structure is lost in its volume. And that is a consistently applied standard. And I would see no reason for me personally not to apply it here. So I have no problem with the bulkhead. I wouldn't have had a problem with a modest rooftop addition, although they are good neighbors and that's to their credit. But I think that the addition has to lose its top floor.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu?
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Goldblum there. I do think that if we didn't have the historic building, this would be fine. I think the proposal looks simple, the masses are big, but I think if we're talking about an alteration to a historic building, then it does erase all trace. And that would be why I would recommend removing the top floor of the addition.
Okay, Commissioner Master.
I also want to commend the applicant for working with their neighbor and eliminating the proposed penthouse and modifying the bulkhead. I agree with Commissioner Chapin's remarks, so I would find this appropriate.
Okay. And I think, we have on the Upper East Side had a long history of recognizing buildings have been expanded over time, or blocks have been replaced with larger apartment buildings, and you have a varied context. And so we have approved larger additions on the Upper East Side. And I think in this context that I could have supported it. It isn't part of a row. It was built with number 63, 65. And so I wouldn't feel that it necessarily had to maintain that relationship to the other two buildings, which belong to a different row. But it doesn't sound like we have the votes for that today. So, I think we could move to vote to do a motion to reduce it by one floor. And, if the applicants do want to come back and pursue it, with a larger group of commissioners and maybe looking at design, we can have them back to do that. But I think maybe that's the right thing to do right now, is just go ahead and do an approval by reducing it with one floor, and then they can move ahead if that's what they want to do. So, Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion for that?
Sure. In the matter of docket 23-05878, 63 East 93rd Street, expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District, Renaissance Revival style row house designed by A.B. Ogden and Son and built in 1891. The application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the expanded Carnegie Hill Historic District. I recommend approval of the modified sloped bulkhead, finding that the construction of this bulkhead will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the bulkhead will not be visible from across the street and will only be visible from an adjacent public plaza, which has limited access, and that the bulkhead will be in keeping with the size, placement, and materiality of rooftop bulkheads typically found in buildings of this age and style. However, I find that the rear yard addition built to the full height of the rear facade will overwhelm the historic volume of this row house and diminish its relationship to its neighbors. Therefore, I recommend that the rear yard addition be reduced in height to preserve the top floor.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
So second.
All right. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right. So it's approved with the modification to reduce it by one floor. But if the applicants do want to rethink the approach, they're welcome to come back to us. All right. And that concludes our day. I want to thank everybody for their participation, and commissioners, thank you always for your hard work, your commitment to our work, and have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll see you on April 4th.